At the airport, she humiliated me in front of everyone. The day I drove Rosie to the airport was the culmination of weeks of my own quiet, dedicated effort. I had been looking forward to it, not because I wanted her to leave, but because I saw it as a testament to my love for her. She was embarking on a grand 3-week Europe trip with her influencer friends, a trip she called critical for her brand. I wanted to be the perfect, supportive partner. I took the day off work, meticulously packed her 3 oversized, brand new suitcases into the back of my SUV, double-checked that her passport and documents were in her designer handbag, and even curated a European Vibes playlist for her flight. To me, this was the silent, steady work of a partnership. It was in the small, unseen acts of service. To her, I was about to learn. I was a liability to the brand she was so desperate to build. The atmosphere in the car was thick with a strange electric tension. Rosie wasn't with me, not really. She was a million miles away, her entire consciousness absorbed by the glowing screen of her phone. Her thumbs flew across the keyboard in a frantic group chat with her friends, Lauren and Ashley. The occasional sharp laugh or frustrated sigh was the only sound she made. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to bridge the digital chasm between us. "You seem a little stressed." "It's the content plan," she replied, her eyes not leaving the screen. "Lauren's shot list is a mess. You wouldn't get it. It's about aesthetics, angles, and peak engagement times." The subtext was clear. "This is my world, not yours. Stay out." I glanced at the suitcases in the rearview mirror. I had bought them for her last month. She had insisted on a specific, ridiculously expensive brand, not for their durability, but because they pop in photos. It was one of many expenses I had quietly covered, writing them off as investments in her happiness. The drive to the airport was a study in silence. My attempts at conversation were met with one-word answers. I tried to play a song we both used to love, a gentle indie track from early in our relationship. She instantly jabbed the off button on the console. "Please, I can't have any distractions," she said, her voice tight. "This trip is a major collaboration. It has to be perfect." I felt that familiar sinking feeling in my gut, the feeling of being secondary, an afterthought. I wasn't her partner in life. I was the financial backer and logistical manager for Rosie à la mode, her online persona. The real her, if she even existed anymore, was buried under layers of filters and hashtags. We finally reached the bustling international terminal. As I unloaded the mountain of luggage onto a cart, I saw them, Lauren and Ashley, standing near the check-in counters like a pair of exotic birds. They were a spectacle of calculated glamour, dressed in coordinated, runway-ready outfits. Their hair was perfect, their makeup flawless, their expressions a practiced blend of boredom and superiority. The moment Rosie saw them, a switch flipped. Her posture straightened, a dazzling, artificial smile plastered on her face. She transformed from my tense, irritable girlfriend into the confident, carefree influencer her followers adored. She adjusted her designer jacket, fluffed her hair, and then her eyes fell on me. She scanned my practical jeans, my comfortable t-shirt, and my worn-in sneakers. A flicker of something, disgust, panic, crossed her face. She strode over to me, closing the small distance between us. Her voice, when it came, was not a whisper. It was a low, sharp hiss, meant only for me but laced with a venom that felt public. "Stop right here. Don't walk with me to the counter. You'll embarrass me in front of my friends." I froze. My hand, which had been pushing the heavy luggage cart, felt numb. The cacophony of the airport, the rolling suitcases, the boarding announcements, the chatter of 100 conversations, faded into a dull, distant hum. In my world, there was only the piercing silence left by her words. They were a blade, not just quick and cold, but twisted for maximum damage. My gaze shifted from her perfectly painted face to her friends, who were now watching us with undisguised amusement, smirking at my obvious dismissal. And in that single, brutal moment, the entire charade of our relationship crumbled. Every dismissive comment, every time she'd called me her assistant as a joke, every time she chose a photo opportunity over a moment with me, it all coalesced into a single, ugly truth. I remembered her birthday dinner, where she spent more time instructing me on how to take the perfect candid photo of her than actually speaking to me. I remembered the countless times I had become an unwilling cameraman, a chauffeur, a walking ATM. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg or argue. The fight had gone out of me, replaced by a sudden, shocking clarity. I let go of the cart, the plastic handle feeling slick and foreign in my hand. I looked her dead in the eye, my own voice even and devoid of emotion. "You're right," I said. "I wouldn't want to embarrass you." Then I turned my back on her, on the life we had pretended to build, and walked away. I didn't look back, but I could feel her stunned silence behind me, a silence that was quickly broken by the forced, bright laughter of her friends. The drive home was surreal. I expected a storm of grief, of heartbreak. Instead, a profound and chilling calm settled over me. It was the calm of a man who had just escaped a burning building. The smoke was clearing, and for the first time in months, I could see. I had been pouring my love, my money, and my energy not into a partnership, but into a performance. She wasn't my partner. She was a content creator, and I was her longest, most exploited sponsor. That night, the calm solidified into action. I opened my laptop and listed the luxury SUV, the one she loved to feature in her day-in-the-life vlogs, for sale. It was in my name, my credit. By the next evening, a young, excited buyer had driven it away, leaving me with a substantial check. The next morning, I hired a junk removal service. I was merciless. The ring lights, the tripods, the mountains of fast fashion clothing spilling out of the spare room, the tacky live, laugh, love decor she insisted on. It all went. 2 hours and 3 truckloads later, my house was empty. It was no longer a cluttered, chaotic content studio. It was a clean, quiet space that was finally, unequivocally, mine. I spent the rest of the day reclaiming my digital life. I changed every password, unlinked my credit cards from her accounts, and blocked her on every platform. Then I began to rebuild. I bought a deep, comfortable couch you could actually sink into. I converted the now empty spare room into a home gym and a workshop for my woodworking hobby, a passion she had once called messy and pointless. While she was curating a fantasy in Paris and Rome, I was building a reality. Her texts started coming in on the second day, a stream of glossy photos and self-congratulatory captions. "You won't believe this amazing view. Pasta in Rome is just chef's kiss. Wish you were here." A hollow, thoughtless platitude. She never once asked why I had gone silent. She didn't notice my absence, only the absence of my fawning replies. I read each message and deleted it without response. My silence was a language she would have to learn to understand. 3 weeks later, her flight landed. She must have walked out into the arrivals hall with a triumphant air, expecting me to be there, ready to play my part as the doting boyfriend, eager to haul her new purchases home. Instead, she was met with nothing. Just the indifferent flow of travelers and the weight of her 3 ridiculously heavy suitcases. After an hour of frantic calls that went straight to my voicemail, she finally hailed an overpriced airport taxi. When she arrived at my house, fuming and exhausted, her key scraped uselessly against a newly changed lock. I was later told by my neighbor, a kind, elderly woman named Carol, that the scene was quite dramatic. Rosie had banged on the door, her voice escalating from annoyed to panicked. She called the landlord, who calmly informed her that since she was not on the lease, he could not grant her access. Her glamorous friends Lauren and Ashley were suddenly so busy and stuck in traffic. Eventually, her parents arrived. Her father, a proud man I had met only a few times, was visibly furious, his voice booming across the quiet suburban street. Her mother was trying to placate both her daughter and her husband, a portrait of familial shame. Carol said Rosie just stood on the porch and sobbed, her perfect travel outfit now rumpled and tear-stained. Me? I was hundreds of miles away, sitting by a crackling campfire under a canopy of stars, breathing in the crisp mountain air. I was finally on my own trip, and I had never felt so free. The collapse of Rosie's influencer empire was swift and brutal. Without my income to fund the illusion, the content dried up. The trips, the designer clothes, the fancy dinners, it all vanished. Her feed became a sad gallery of recycled photos and cryptic, self-pitying quotes about overcoming adversity. Her fair-weather friends, Lauren and Ashley, abandoned her the moment the well ran dry. The free ride was over. The final nail in her online coffin was a desperate GoFundMe campaign, where she painted herself as the victim of a manipulative, toxic relationship. But it was too late. Someone, I suspect it was Lauren trying to distance herself, had already leaked screenshots of her texts and a description of the airport incident to our mutual friends. The narrative she tried to spin fell apart. The campaign raised less than $100. Months passed, and with each one, the fog of my old life lifted further, revealing a landscape I hadn't realized I'd missed so desperately. The life that had once served as a mere backdrop for Rosie's drama became my own. Its narrative finally centered on my own desires and joys. The frantic, hollow energy she had cultivated was replaced by a deep, grounding calm. The first and most rewarding step was reconnecting with the friends she had so casually deemed boring and unambitious. I realized now that her definition of boring was simply authentic. I called Dave, my buddy from college, and we spent a weekend in his garage, grease up to our elbows, breathing life back into a rusted 1970s Mustang. The roar of its engine when it finally turned over was a more satisfying sound than any compliment Rosie had ever given me. It was the sound of creation, of patience rewarded, a feeling no designer purchase could ever replicate. I started joining Mark and Sarah on their weekly hikes. They were the couple Rosie had dismissed because the lighting in the woods is terrible for photos, and there are bugs. But as I stood with them on a misty summit, looking down at the valley shrouded in clouds, I felt a sense of peace that was profound. We'd share coffee from a thermos and talk for hours about things that actually mattered: our fears, our dreams, our place in the world. These were moments that didn't need to be captured by a camera because they were permanently etched into my memory. My house transformed as well. The beautiful oak dining table I built with my own two hands wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of my patience, my effort, and my newfound freedom. Around that table, I hosted dinners, played board games, and had the kind of deep, meandering conversations that had been impossible in Rosie's world of curated perfection. My home was no longer a content studio. It was a sanctuary, a place where the people I cared about could come to relax, laugh, and be themselves. I was embracing a life that felt solid and true, a life that didn't need a filter to be beautiful. For a long time, the memory of that day at the airport remained a tender bruise on my psyche. It had felt like the most profound humiliation of my life. The sting of public rejection, the cold finality in her eyes, it was a heavy burden to carry. But as time went on and the foundations of my new life grew stronger, my perspective shifted. Looking back, I see that moment for what it truly was: a gift. A brutal, painful, but necessary gift. Her cruel words, "Don't walk with me," were not the end of my dignity. They were the exact moment I began to reclaim it. It was the shock to the system I needed to finally wake up and walk away from the toxicity I had mistaken for love. One evening, I was sitting on my porch in a chair I had built, a glass of good whiskey in my hand, watching the sunset bleed across the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint, pleasant scent of sawdust from my workshop. In that quiet, contemplative moment, I thought of her. Not with the hot rage or bitter resentment that had initially fueled me, but with a distant, detached pity. She had chosen the image over the reality. She had dedicated her life to a filtered existence, a performance for an audience that didn't truly care, leaving her with nothing of substance when the applause faded. I, on the other hand, had chosen myself. I had chosen the messy, imperfect, beautiful truth of a real life, filled with genuine connections and tangible accomplishments. And as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, I took a slow, deep breath. A simple, undeniable truth settled in my soul with the weight of absolute certainty. We had both walked away that day at the airport, but only one of us had walked toward happiness.